All right, well, the White House is touting the Russian expulsions as evidence that it's not going easy on Moscow. Spokeswoman Sarah Sanders released a statement saying the expulsion of undeclared Russian intelligence officers by the United States and more than 24 partner nations and NATO allies earlier this week was an appropriate response to the Russian attack on the soil of the United Kingdom. Russia's response was not unanticipated, and the United States will deal with it. President Trump didn't mention the issue during a speech in Ohio. Instead, he used the event to revisit some of those familiar campaign themes.
I was always very good at building. It was always my best thing. I think better than being president, I was maybe good at building.
Well, Peter Mathews joins me now here in LA. He's professor of political science at Cypress College. Peter, thank you for being with us once again. So which surprised you more, the fact that President Trump didn't bring up Russia or Stormy Daniels at the Ohio speech?
I think Stormy Daniels, although we know he's never brought her up, right? He's never tweeted about her. But Russia is interesting going back to that. You know, this is the inflection points, too. At the beginning of the history, back in 1917, 1918, there was intervention in the Russian Civil War from the West as well. That's made Russia very paranoid about outsiders. Then you have World War II, and after that, you know, actually more recently with the Cold War ending, and you have NATO going right up to Russia's border. And this gave Putin some reason to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? Is this encirclement again? And you know, it's a situation where Russia used to be a superpower, equal to the United States militarily. Now it's way down. It's in 1991, it became way down compared to the U.S. They're trying to gain back that stature. And that goes back to historical precedents and actions that happened.
And to pick up on what Robert was just saying, just briefly, do you think it ends here, or do you see this continuing, the tit for tat?
Again, I think it does depend on President Trump quite a bit. He is the top person who can change the atmosphere, you know, and yet he's constrained by Congress. It's very suspicious of Russia's motives and Putin's motives right now. The sanction that they voted for almost forced him to do it. So there's so many variables involved here, especially Trump himself.
Speaking of variables, that speech in Ohio, which was freewheeling, it was wide-ranging, it was supposed to be about infrastructure. But
being very kind.
Yes, but it certainly wasn't about that. He wanted to talk about the war, you know, that familiar campaign theme, and he's not happy that he hasn't gotten the money to build it so far. So much so, he's even talking about the DMZ, the border between North and South Korea. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Look at Korea. We have a border at Korea. We have a wall of soldiers. We don't get paid very much for this, do we? You look at that, nobody comes through. But our own border, we don't take care of it. Think of it. We spend billions of dollars in other countries maintaining their borders, and we can't maintain our borders in our own country. Is there something a little bit wrong with that?
Have at it, Peter Mathews.
Completely
where are we going with this?
Uncomparable. How do you compare the two situations when Korea is a situation that's something completely different, two hostile nations, that one backed by us. Mexico has been our ally, it's been our neighbor, it's had cultural exchanges and with NAFTA going on. And so really you should understand that the reason that a lot of folks came across the border is not because of the weather here or the food here, which is great. They came across the border because of what happened with NAFTA and with neoliberalism and exporting of our jobs to cheap labor in Mexico, keeping the Mexicans poor, not paying them enough, not having a fair NAFTA, fair trade instead of free trade, would be higher wages, higher environmental standards. Bill Clinton didn't do that, and Trump should be talking about raising wages across all borders. Instead he's like going after countries.
But if you're sitting in Mexico and you hear that, if you're the Mexican government, you're Mexican president, you're thinking what? Because it does frame how he sees Mexico, and or does it? Or is it just campaign rhetoric? Is it just campaign trail talk?
I think a campaign trail has a lot to do with it. He's at that base of 33% that are just completely not aware of the full issues. You know, in Europe, they tried fair trade and did quite well for many decades, right? The Northern European countries allowed Greece to come in the common market. They insisted on higher wages, higher labor standards, and higher environmental standards, and then both sides could trade more fairly because the Greek workers had more money in their hands to buy the German products. We could have done the same thing here. We didn't do it. Trump is not talking about that, and that's the real reason for the poverty and the illegal immigration.
Well, as we talk about trade deals, I want to talk about the deal that the U.S. just finalized with South Korea just this week. Good deal. The president was trumpeting that deal. And then he said this in Ohio. Take a listen.
We're moving along very nicely with North Korea. We'll see what happens. Certainly, the rhetoric has calmed down just a little bit. Would you say? Would you say? And we'll see how it all turns out. Maybe it'll be good, and maybe it won't. And if it's no good, we're walking. And if it's good, we will embrace it. But it's going to be very interesting over the next period of time. And South Korea has been wonderful. But we'll probably hold that deal up for a little while, see how it all plays out.
Can you help me understand what the South Korean deal between the ally that is South Korea and the U.S. has to do with getting a deal with Kim Jong-un of North Korea?
It's unfathomable that he doesn't connect the two properly. And really, South Korea is the one who brought North Korea to the table, even had an invitation for Trump to come there and to meet with him. So I think that he's got to accommodate South Korea's concerns. I don't think he understands the picture fully at all. He doesn't understand the agreed framework under Bill Clinton when there was actually negotiations going on to reduce the nuclear weapons procurement and production for 10 years or 8 years at least. Things are more stable. He understands that negotiations should be that way, and we shouldn't be provocative like he's been the last few months with North Korea and saying crazy things a lot of the time. I wish he'd just listen to his experts more. I'm sure he has enough money to hire the right people. I know the government does.
Well, hiring lawyers is proving to be difficult, so I don't know about experts.
Exactly.
Very quickly, before I let you go, I want to talk about Rick Gates, who, as you know, is in the crosshairs of Robert Mueller and the special counsel investigation. And now we learn that from court papers, court filings, and CNN's own independent reporting, that Gates is playing a central role with Mueller in terms of establishing this idea of whether there was contact, illegal contact between the Trump campaign and Russia, even so far as to learn that he's had some contacts with a Russian that had some ties to the Russian spy agencies. If you're in the White House tonight, are you trembling? Are you quaking? Are you suddenly very, very worried that this investigation is heating up, not cooling down?
This is a very significant direction in the wrong direction for the White House, the right direction for the rest of us, I think, because now Mueller is about to establish the connection between the Trump campaign, through Gates, through his association with Manafort's partner in the Russian intelligence agent, and the Trump campaign. So that's really a big connection coming up here. Until now, we've seen that Mueller was spending more time on the obstruction of justice issue. Now it's more the so-called collusion issue that's coming to the forefront. That's more dangerous for Trump, actually.
Well, we are still all just reading the tea leaves because we're not getting all the details.
That's true. We don't have it all.
We don't have it all. But Peter Mathews, we appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.